Hello everyone, it's been a while, 2 months since our last episode, but there was important reason why there was a big of a gap. Reason being, Jake almost lost his hand. No, it's not like metaphor of some sort, it was literally a thing. Thankfully, he is there, things getting better, and later we will cover that maybe a bit more in depth. But Jake, so how are you doing now, and are you ready to roll this third episode of Crafted for Speed? I don't know. Let us know a bit of a background, what has happened.
I'm doing much better, thanks. It was pretty bad. Tom's not exaggerating when he says I almost lost my arm. I genuinely did. It was like just a stupid crash on a mountain bike. It wasn't really exciting. You know, it wasn't like a big crash. I wasn't like doing a jump or anything, but I fell awkwardly, caught my arm. It's basically snapped in two. I could put some pretty gnarly pictures up if people want to see. And I was in hospital for a while, and it was all like, didn't look good. And then my new hero, the surgeon, his name's Michael. Shout out to Michael, Dr. Michael. He basically saved my arm. So yeah, it's pretty brutal. We'll talk about it more later, but it's going to be a while, I think, until I can ride a bike again. But I'm not giving up on it, and I should be back at some point. But for now, I can write more podcast episodes.
Fingers crossed, man. And Jay haven't showed me the pictures yet. I'm not exactly sure or I want to see them, but thankfully, like, things are getting better.
There's different levels, so like I could show some of it when it first happened, and then that's like something out of a zombie film. Or I could show some like recently when they're kind of doing what they're doing currently, which we'll again talk a bit more about later. But some of that stuff's quite cool. It looks like something out of a, I don't know, Star Wars or something. But maybe people could comment. They say, Jake, show us your gory arm. And if they comment that, then we'll put the pictures up.
If people comment, Jake, show me your hand, then maybe we'll allow them to use Stop Cycling Performance app. Not the best marketing initiative.
Well, whatever works, right? I've got to get value out of this somehow. Anyway, before all that happened, you know, we had the last two episodes, which are around like setting a goal, and then kind of, I guess the episode 2 is about physiology, learning like how your body is producing energy. And then today we're going to bring those two episodes together and talk specifically about, okay, you've done some testing, and then we're going to like show those numbers and kind of build then the outline of a plan to get, you know, to hit the goal that we've kind of made up. We've said, it's not concrete, but it's there to give context to what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a very good set. So basically we will have events in the near future which potentially I could participate, and in order for me to participate they're good, based on my testing results, we will kind of figure out what would be the best training advice. Maybe we can jump straight into the testing results. During those tests, I recorded myself all in Suffer, so I have those videos. They will be available in the channel separately, but I will also add some of them here to see.
People want to see your pain face.
Yeah, because I put the camera on handlebars pointing straight into me.
Yeah.
So you will have that opportunity. The testing was awful. Partially because usually I don't do those max efforts. And those were like...
Tough. Okay, so to give some context on the actual testing. So the testing consisted, it was over 2 days, right? And it consists of a 20-second max sprint, and then a 12-minute maximum effort, and then on day 2 you're doing a 3-minute maximum effort and a 6-minute maximum effort. Which was the worst in terms of how hard it was?
The longest. Longest
The
was
12 minute.
yeah. Towards the end, it was like dizzy even, but
You
I've
went
been
hard
pushing.
enough then.
Like yeah, I've been pushing quite hard.
I always find the 3 minute is the worst. It's so intense. Like you go out as hard as you can and you just hold on for dear life. Like the first 60 seconds is okay, and then the final 2 minutes it feels as long as 12 minutes.
Yeah, it very much, I guess, depends where you are doing that. In my mind, I chosen like a road with a bit of incline, but apparently there was a bit of downwards as well. And I've been flying like 50 kilometers per hour, cadence 120 plus. And I'm like, where that gradient came from down hard in a sense of intensity, not necessarily through the power, which was like strange. 6 minutes was also hard, but when I've been doing that, there was few sandy corners where I had to let it off for a few seconds, and that kind of drops down the result in a sense, because you are like not pedaling for a few seconds and it immediately averaged like down, but also it gives you a bit of a rest. Like that, those few seconds, even though it looks minor, but in the overall 6 minutes time frame, they give you that a breath of fresh air, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah. And it won't affect the results that much by having little rests or like losing the power touch.
Yeah.
Because actually we're not looking at just the test result. We'll take more data than that. So you look at all the sessions that you've done in the last 6 months, and you're taking like a more of an average. But the reason we got you to do the testing is because then you have like a good baseline to work from. So it makes the results more accurate. I wanted to quickly say, so again, the point of the testing, a bit like we talked about in episode 2, we're trying to work out what is the combination that you produce power between an aerobic engine and your anaerobic engine. So we're looking at what's your VO2 max and then what is your VLA max, right? The VO2 max being the total size of your aerobic engine and the VLA max being like the total size of your anaerobic engine. Before we've even looked at it, if you were to like guess it yourself, do you think you're going to be like high VO2, or do you think you'll have like a bigger anaerobic engine compared to your aerobic engine? Where do you think the strength would lie?
I would say towards VO2 more than anaerobic.
Okay, yeah, that was pretty accurate.
And also, this guess is also made a bit based on the Training Peaks graphs. You know, where you have profile of where you are at, like category 2, category 1, I don't know, World Pro.
Yeah, done the testing, so here are the results. So you said you thought your VO2 max was going to be higher than your anaerobic power, and I actually agreed with you and said, yeah, it probably will be. But I forgot that, no, it's not. VLA max, it's the maximum amount of lactate that you produce per like your body weight, like the amount of blood that goes around your system, right? So lactate is produced into the blood. So the more lactate you produce, the like stronger your anaerobic engine, right? So a high number would be like, if you're a good sprinter, you're going to produce high wattage very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a VO2 max again is like to body weight. So it's the amount of oxygen that goes around your system per kind of kilo. And you're quite a big guy, so you've got a lot of muscle mass. You know, you're 80 kilos, 83 kilos.
Yeah.
So naturally, it will be harder for you to have a big VO2 max because there's like more space for the oxygen to go around.
In terms of the muscles amount, or like, why you said that there is more place to go?
Yeah, there's more place for it to go. So it's like the same volume. If we had the same volume of oxygen in our bodies, mine would be higher because there's less space. So it's like more concentrated.
Yeah, makes sense.
So your VO2 max came out at 67, right? Which is still really good. So I tend to say, you know, anything above 60 is very high, and you're in like the top, probably, I don't know, you're probably in the top 1-2% of the whole population. Above 70, you're in like the top kind of 2-3% of people that train a lot. So you're kind of right up there. And again, because you're big, it's going to be harder to get to that point. And then above 75, going to 80, or in like super elite, world class level. So 67 is about what I would have expected for you. To put it in context, for the 3 minutes, you did over 500 watts, which is big. Like, that's a big number. And the 3-minute test is generally fairly kind of correlates quite highly to your VO2 max, because it is basically where you'll meet, you're kind of at that maximal level. The first minute you're using the anaerobic system, but your blood, like your muscles fill with lactate and it feels really hard, and you're kind of going cross-eyed and thinking, God, this is hard. So your aerobic system has to work maximally to keep producing that power. So you reach VO2 max basically by the end of the 3 minutes. So, and 500 watts is a really good score. The sprint, you did like around 950 watts. It was close to 1,000 watts, which is pretty good for a 20-second seated sprint.
Yeah, but it's worth noting that I unclipped one leg like 5 seconds remaining or something like that.
Okay, so it might have been
affected.
Even higher.
Yeah, I would say that it could be, but it's also about the technique. I rarely do seated high watts effort, because normally that comes as standing sprint usually. So it was probably the first time I ever did it in this way. So it was interesting, I would say, to do this one. I was excited to even try it in order to figure out what it could be. This one was the most fun of all, I can tell you.
Okay, that's good. But I also imagine that if you did it again, you'd get a higher score. What do you reckon you could do? Like, I reckon you could do 1,200 watts.
I have no idea.
It's all technique. So some people can do like similar. Some people struggle. So then we kind of look at, okay, your 6 minute and your 12 minute is how, is like essentially the difference between your 3 minute and your 6 minute shows, okay, if a really high 3 minute compared to not so high 6 minute indicates, okay, a lot of that 3 minute power came anaerobically. Whereas if you had a 6 minute power that was somewhat closer to your 3 minute, it shows that, okay, a bit more of it comes aerobically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and is there some sort of percentage where the viewer could calculate it? Like, let's say they do 3 minutes and then they do 6 minutes and then they calculate it somehow on their own. Is there a possibility? Maybe there are some like online forms or whatever, or it's only available in the app?
There are some online forms. So we don't do that at top. So the top system is kind of more complicated than that. If you use those online forms, you can get like a good approximation, but you're never going to know the rest of the data that you end up getting, right? So the fact that we get VO2 max and we know what your anaerobic system is allows us to then do some other cool stuff, which I'll show you in a sec. So your threshold was like 355, which again, it's like you came out about expected. It's kind of what I thought it would be. 12 minute was almost 400. Again, that's pretty good. So
what is fat max?
So I will explain in a sec. So fat max was like quite, your fat max is naturally going to be lower because you're burning more, your anaerobic system is more dominant. This is like a power curve, which most people will have seen before. So yeah, time is at the bottom, and then you've got like, okay, sprint from 0 to 5 seconds, all the way over to like 2 hours or whatever it is. Your glycolytic system is like VLA Max, that's the anaerobic system, right? So when you look at a power curve like this, you can think basically all this chunk is coming anaerobically. Yeah, does this make sense?
Yeah.
And then the aerobic system, like here, between 0 and like 10 seconds, it's not really doing much, it's not really fired up. But when you get over to like an hour, the aerobic system's doing most of the power. Yeah. And then another way of looking at it is this at the bottom is like, okay, again, what you're producing aerobically and then anaerobically. 3-minute test, right? You did 500 watts. So by the end of that 3 minutes, you're basically a VO2 max. Like your oxygen uptake, like you can see here, it's plateauing. You're not really going to get it much higher. And like a big portion of it has to come anaerobically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, okay, this is how your two energy systems are creating power. What that means, for every time you burn, your anaerobic system is doing something, you're producing lactate, and this is the amount of lactate you're producing, right? So when you work below threshold, and your threshold is coming out at 355 watt, when you come below, you're not producing, your body's able to like recycle the lactate, and that's what threshold is. So anytime you're below it, your threshold doesn't like, your threshold basically will stay constant at a low level. As soon as you go over threshold, your body can't get rid of the lactate fast enough, so it starts rising exponentially.
And why this graph is rising a bit, and then after 300 it shows down, and then it goes exponentially up. Why it goes down before it going up?
Yeah. So this is where we then get to the really cool part, which is, let me zoom in on this. Or whenever you produce lactate, you burn in carbohydrate. Yeah, that's the fuel source that it takes to do the anaerobic energy production. The aerobic system likes to utilize fat. It can utilize carbohydrate, but it basically just uses fat. That's what it likes to use. So you can see here, you have this period at which your fat metabolism is kind of peaking, and then it drops off where the lactate overtakes. There's like not enough space for the fat to be utilized, and essentially carbohydrate becomes the only fuel source, which then means your lactate levels rise exponentially.
Yeah, makes
so
sense.
around here, your fat is like dominating. That's why the lactate level rises a bit, because it's your lactate level rises from 0 because it like won't be doing much, but then you're doing something, it's coming up. Then your fat overtakes, and it's like boom, it's like it's dominating here, and then bang, carbohydrate is the only fuel source, so you're burning loads of lactate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. The question was, what is fat max? And then you spent 10 minutes showing all those cool graphs to visualize it. Super cool.
So
Super
you understand
cool.
what fat max is now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
So now
So
I won't go higher than 200 watts because I want to burn that belly.
I mean, so you say that's actually a really good like training zone. So when people think about like zone 2 gets chucked around a lot, right? Oh, do loads of zone 2. Kind of doesn't mean what you think it means. So zone 2 is actually like to get the most out of your zone 2 training. It's harder than you think. You want to be riding at fat max because that is the intensity at which you're stressing your body the most amount for the minimal amount of anaerobic pathway. So your aerobic system is getting the most benefit, right? Because it's working really hard, but as soon as you go beyond fat max, the anaerobic pathways start to kick in too much, and you end up starting to train them a bit. This chart kind of again shows you. So if you think your fat max is like 240 watts, it's where these two lines
deviate from one another.
Which is where so the anaerobic system is starting to do a little bit, but you're getting like maximal aerobic response from minimal anaerobic response. And that is essentially, people call it zone 2, I call it zone 3 because it is fat max. So you have like easy endurance, zone 2, zone 3 is fat max. And so when people say, oh, I do lots of zone 2, what you actually want to do is lots of fat max. Kind of digressed from the main point, but I think that was useful.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
This is, again, we're kind of plotting all your testing source here. This is your current ability. Then what we then do is say, okay, let's compare where you are today with what your target event is. And for the purposes of this, we've said you're going to do the Alps Epic, right?
Alps Epic is a 5 day stage race, which happens in France. But for this example, we took one stage only. Which
Yeah,
one? Like, which one of Alps Epic stages did you took, or how that works, so that people would understand? Let's say they have their target event, and how they can select. Like, because event has 5 stages. How
yeah.
that in the system correlates if it's multi-stage race event.
Yeah, so I took the hardest stage, which I think was stage 3, but don't quote me on that. I can't remember now off the top of my head.
So in
But
general, it's like 70 kilometers, 2.5 of elevation, something along those lines.
yeah. And then essentially what we do is we match it to similar kind of similar races in the database, and it's going to pull out, okay, this is what the kind of profile that's the same as your profile, so your metabolic profile, this is what it would take to do that race and to finish in, say, the top 10%, the top 25%, the kind of bottom 50%, or the bottom 25%, right? So it'll pull out and it'll say, for the same data points here, so like the expected 3-minute power would be this, the expected anaerobic maximum would be this, the expected VO2 max would be this. So we can kind of overlay it here. If someone was looking, wasn't using a system like this, but was just like, you could use Strava, and you can just like look at the leaderboards and get a rough idea of like, okay, how fast is someone going? You know, you can look at like, I mean, we went through this, didn't we, in episode 2, basically.
Yeah.
So we won't go too far into it again, because I was looking at the specifically the Masters 30 category. You know, really, okay, finishing in the top 10% is somewhat achievable, or finishing in the top 25% is definitely achievable for you. And you've kind of proved that from the race you did the other week, which you can go and look at the race analysis.
Yeah, it's
if you want more info on that.
Volcat Igualada from Spain, 3-day stage race, amazing single tracks based, and we did race analysis with Jake as well. We also analyzed a lot of data. Well, maybe not as much as you are seeing here, but it was interesting. So if you want to, you can check it out. Side note. Sorry.
That's okay. So one interesting point about the Alps Epic was the guy that raced the M30 category, right? The guy who won the M30 category won the race overall.
All right.
He actually won the whole thing. So the numbers are a little bit skewed. So basically now what we do, okay, we compare your, you know, this green, you, versus what it takes to finish in the top 10%. So straight away, when you look at this visualization on the left, you can pick out, okay, your anaerobic systems are kind of like overdeveloped compared to the more aerobic system.
It's not surprising because that race is about climbing and sustained effort rather than explosiveness, punchier, and etc.
Yeah, exactly. And guys are going to be, you know, 65 kilos average in the top 10%, whereas, you know, you're 80 kilos, so their VO2 max is naturally going to be higher. The other thing to really caveat, and it's really important, is that this target profile for the 90 is not like your profile, which is fresh. So, you know, yours is based on like your fresh best efforts when you did the testing, whereas this profile is based on the fact that they've done the race. So, you know, the actual race itself might be 3,000 kilojoules, you know, 4 hours long. So they're doing these numbers throughout that event. So this is what, if we then go to the chart on the right, which compares the same thing, but as a kind of different visualization, so you can see where you stack up. Actually, your weakest element is that like fitness, the fatigue profile. So for like the system thinks that after 1,000 kilojoules, your like body will break down. Whereas, you know, even the bottom 25% of finishers, because they're finishing, so by proxy, they're doing this effort, it's like 2,500 kilojoules, whereas a guy that's winning is doing 3,000. So you have to be able to produce these numbers after 3,000 kilojoules, basically.
And
So while
that's
you're
extremely, like, to give us into perspective, because I know what it feels like after 3,000 kilojoules. I guess my results would be like 25% slower.
yeah, probably. Yeah.
So it's not easy thing to do.
Yeah. So I think that's the key for here when you look at this. Okay, what's standing out? It's like that fatigue resistance, and then overall, because your anaerobic system is more powerful, your fat max is lower because you're burning more carbohydrate, so it kind of pushes that curve we looked at before to the left. So your fat max is lower, whereas and your VO2 max, again, because you're a bigger guy compared to the skinny climbers, is lower, 67. So you're not quite in this range, T90, you're more T75. So essentially, what will the plan do? Well, the plan will focus on how do we raise your aerobic power, your VO2 max, and then how do we make you more fatigue resistant, right?
One question. Let's say estimation for T25 for the bottom, VO2 max is 47. Do you think it's precise? Because I would say that maybe people are a bit more fitter in general, or how do you see that coming
Well, this
along?
is saying so no, because this is essentially saying guys that are finishing in the bottom 25%,
Yeah.
right? They're like, if there's 50 people in the age group, they're finishing
Yeah.
in the bottom 5 or the bottom 10, whatever it is. And again, remember, this is a VO2 max of 47 after or around 2,500 kilojoules.
Yeah.
So it's not fresh. If they did it fresh, maybe their VO2 max would be like 55.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And to put that into perspective, the guy that's like, okay, the top 10%, their VO2 max is 75 when they're doing 3,000 kilojoules. So if they're doing fresh, it might be like, high 70s, even 80.
Towards 80. Aye.
So the next thing you're kind of paying attention to is how long have we got for this plan? So how we kind of, it's easy to see, okay, we want to focus on VO2 max and fatigue resistance, right? But when is the Alps Epic? It's only 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So how much kind of improvement can you expect to see in that time? And essentially, when you think about the aerobic system, it takes much longer and much more effort to get significant change than the anaerobic system. Okay, the aerobic system, right, is working all the time. So the fact that we're sitting here talking, it's doing stuff. And even, to get beyond, like, you have to do, like, say, more than 100 watts to get it to make a significant difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you want to be doing stuff at like 200 watts or fat max to get to target that good aerobic change, right? And you need to do a lot of it to get the body to adapt a lot because your body's used to it. Whereas you can see here, the anaerobic system, which is the bit above the blue curve, it's never really doing anything until you go above 400 watts. And you don't do that very much in your life,
Yeah.
If you think about in a week, how much do you go over 400 watts? Maybe it's like an hour's worth.
At most.
Yeah, so it doesn't take as much to get anaerobic change. And another example I like to use is if you think about, we want to increase your, say, 6-minute power, just for example, I'm not saying we do, but say you did, then if you think about what a 6-minute power makeup is, for you did 430 watts. So you can see it's a good chunk comes anaerobically and then the rest is aerobic, right? So you can change your 6-minute power in 2 ways. You could focus on trying to get more anaerobic response because you don't have much time, which kind of adds to the top, you're adding to the top here.
Yeah.
Or if you've got loads of time, you can be like, oh, I'll work on my aerobic system and I can add the big block at the bottom. Yeah. So in 6 weeks, maybe you could gain 10 watts overall, But really, you would gain the most of that, like say 8 watts of the 10 by focusing on like the hard anaerobic efforts, which means doing stuff from, for you, 400 to 600 watts.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Downside of that is you'd be less fuel efficient because you've worked your anaerobic system. So you're burning more carbohydrate and less fat, which means effectively you run out of fuel quicker, which is going to reduce your fatigue resistance. So for you, because you're trying to work on fatigue resistance, you've got to be careful about doing too much anaerobic work.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to over respond there, because you'll actually get even less fatigue resistant. So
it's like a very thin line.
Yeah, exactly. You're kind of in a difficult place where if you were targeting this race and you only had 6 weeks, you want to be targeting your fuel efficiency, number one, your fatigue resistance. So you kind of have to do as much training as you can in this like fat max sweet spot zone, so that you can like maximize your aerobic response.
As we are in this graph, probably it's also good visualization for the sweet spot.
So sweet spot is normally like, okay, where's is like just below threshold, right? So your threshold was 350, which is about here. So sweet spot essentially is like, for you, 310 to 340-ish. And then zone 4, this is the tempo zone. This slightly redder zone is tempo. So for you, you kind of want to be in this zone, zone 3, the orangey one, and then the redder one, between this area here. So between 300 watts and 230 watts. So it's always dependent on what it is you're trying to get, and this is why I always start with the goal, then kind of break that down. What does that take? And then look at, okay, where am I now? So that you can put the two together and effectively get that, get that nice visualization that you can then, easily say, where do I stack up? And then that helps you plan what you need to work on. And then the time scale means, okay, what can I realistically achieve in the time scale? Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing, so the final thing that you could do is focusing on essentially, race specific efforts, because you've only got 6 weeks. So practice putting out 3,000 kilojoules and making sure that you're doing the amount of intensity required during the race, because that again will help overall become more fatigue resistant. You're breaking the muscle down, you're like nailing them for their, the maximum amount of work they can do, and then they will adapt.
Yeah, we will go to the training in a second, but I wonder, let's say in this instance, what would be more beneficial, either to, let's say, do our stage race for like training purposes in between, or do very specific training in order to work on those weaknesses? So which would be your ideal recommendation for that?
So in this scenario where you've only got 6 weeks, being able to focus on the training is probably more important, because you'll get more, you can control it more, right? And for you, it's like really important to be able to get the most out of that 6 weeks. Whereas say your event was, 6 months away, then being able to put some racing in is really important, because you get that race form, race practice. But during the race, you don't know what to expect. So for example, you've only got 6 weeks, you decide you're going to do a week-long stage race, but you, crash on day 1 and break your bike, and then you've lost a whole week of training.
But you can crash during the training, and you maybe even miss the whole season. So
very good.
Things can happen.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, very good. Oh, that hurt.
But actually, there was no pun intended. But eventually, it finished like this.
Yeah, you got me. The final thing I wanted to talk about was like making race-specific sessions. Which, when I think about what a race-specific session is, I look at something like this. So you break down what the event is in terms of the energy output. So, 3,000 kilojoules. 1,000 of those kilojoules is coming above like the 6-minute power, so above 420 watts. So it's about trying to get around, that's around 60 minutes over 400 watts within a kind of 3.5 hour ride. Yeah.
Key J above 6 means above 6 minutes.
Yeah, above like your peak 6-minute power.
Got it.
Yeah. And then bursts are like the sprints. So like having, like 5-second bursts, a 5-second sprint, like you come out of a corner and you have to sprint. Or,
gain speed, etc. Climb.
And in a mountain bike race, a long mountain bike race, there's a lot of bursts because it's a very, stop start, mountain biking is naturally on off all the time.
Yeah, it depends on the race. If it's long climb, long descent, it would be a bit more constant. But if it's very spiky, like Volcat was, for instance, it would be spiky and bursty as hell.
Yeah, but even this race, like the Epic, which is, there's a lot of, long climbs, there's still a huge amount of bursts happening because that's just like the natural cadence of a race, of a mountain bike race.
Yeah.
In this example, if I was to set you a race-specific session, it would be like, say, 3.5 hours at, Fat Max, which is 240 watts. And then within that 3.5 hours, you want to be doing 60 minutes over 400 watts. Not all in one go. You could break that up with like, 5-minute blocks throughout the day. And then you also want to be doing kind of, if you're doing it off-road, making sure that you are kind of replicating, kind of keeping your speed up. So making those bursts when you're coming out of corners and on the technical sections and all of that.
So then you said like keeping the birds within some time frame during the whole duration. Does it mean that you should do like 2 minutes burst, or it can be just up to 10 seconds burst and then you continue going? So you don't have to do intervals like of some sort. Just
a burst
peaks.
is like, it could be 2 seconds, 5 seconds. It's just like, say, you're on a technical piece of single track and you come around a corner, you have to hit the brakes or you have to ease off the pedals.
Yeah, makes sense,
and then as soon as you can get back on the pedals, you go hard enough that it counts as like a burst.
That would be like hard effort. How then easy efforts would look like when we look at the training plan during the week? How many of those hard efforts you can do to not blow yourself?
So this is a great question because that leads into the next episode, which is going to be all about kind of monitoring recovery and monitoring progress as you go through a plan and go through. Traditionally, there was like, you had people would make training plans, and 6 weeks was a good one, where you would like plan every single day for 6 weeks. This is what I'm going to do all 6 weeks, and I'm just going to follow the plan. Boom, 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 boom. Right? But a good plan is dynamic because you don't know how you're going to feel tomorrow. You don't know how you're going to respond to training next week. You don't know how you're going to respond to training in 6 weeks. So while you can say, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve in this time scale, a really good plan is dynamic all the time and changing based on like how you wake up in the morning, monitoring things like sleep and resting heart rate and how much training you've done recently and other metrics which we talk about. You might wake up and go, hey, I'm seeing this stuff, I need to have an easy day.
Kind of mentioned quite a lot of times the need and the importance of fluidity in the training plan, that you can change things, etc. But can it backfire in a way where I'm not feeling like I'm doing it today, where it comes from the laziness of some sort? There are some sort of people who do training because it's kind of a burden for them. They kind of want to feel good during the race, but they don't want to train that much. And then they might, there is minority of such people, but just for instance, they just write it off like, I'm tired for today, where in reality they are lazy.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't think having like a structured set plan will force them into doing the training. If someone is lazy and not motivated, I don't like to use the word lazy, but I would use the word unmotivated, right?
Hmm.
If someone is unmotivated, then they're unmotivated. They're not going to do it regardless most of
Uh-huh.
the time. But by having a fluid plan that adapts, you can kind of make the best when you are motivated, because you'll be able to kind of check in with yourself in the morning and decide, hey, no, you know what? I don't know, the weather's nice outside. I slept well. I don't have meetings all day. I've got like 2 hours this morning where I can go out and really work hard. So I'll do a hard session. And
Hmm.
because we've done this kind of planning, you know what that hard session should be. For you, if you had a 2 hour spare, or if you woke up that day and you felt like you felt great and you were like, sun's out, I'm feeling good, I'm going to go out and do a hard session, I'm going to go get a good session in, I've got 2 hours, then you know, okay, I want to be trying to do an hour over 400 watts throughout that 2 hours. And then the rest of the time, I want to be doing, 250 watts. So it's a really hard day that's going to push your it's going to simulate the race nicely, and it's going to like maximally kind of hit your aerobic system to get the best gain you can get for what we're targeting.
In the next episode, we're going to talk about recovery as well, and that would kind of answer a lot of questions which I have. But still, let's say I have 2 days where I have a lot of time. Like, for instance, my schedule allows me to do 2 days hard and not hard. I have two free days. Can I go both of those days hard without enough rest and then ease off on the next days?
Yes, yeah. And for you, you sort of should, because you're doing a stage race, right? So
Hmm.
stacking up hard days is a good idea. That's good training. If again, and this is where it's hard to make, this is why I don't like concrete plans, because things change, even not to do with your body, your system. Like, you know, almost everyone that is listening to this or will listen to this, or anyone that's kind of interested in training, 90% of them have a job, and their
Yeah.
main focus in life is their job and their family. So that's always a priority. And you have to like decide, maybe you've got the space for 2 days of hard training, but you kind of prioritize, okay, can I do that? If the answer is yes, then yes, you can do too. But sometimes it's like, maybe it's not the right decision.
Yeah, makes sense.
People might be a bit frustrated by the end of this section, because I've not given them this like blueprint to make kind of
Hmm.
3-4 week plans. But this is what I'm saying. A plan shouldn't be like that. A plan should be much more dynamic. And if you're self coached, then you kind of work out what are those things that I need to focus on. And from that, you can build those key sessions. And it's deciding on the day, or, a day in advance, 2 days in advance, I think I'll do the key session here. And the next session, the next podcast, will talk about how to manage yourself to
Hmm.
make sure you're in a good place to hit those key sessions. It's not necessarily like there's no real the optimal way of training is not, here's a blueprint for 4 weeks, go away.
During this video, you showed nice visuals from the app. Does it mean that if someone goes and registers to the app, they would see them as well? How that works? I don't know. Because you set it up for me and we can see that. It's nice. But I wonder how it would end up for anyone who would want to see that. Maybe what's the procedure, just briefly?
At the moment, it's still like a beta, like a test product, essentially a closed beta. So it's on a closed server. Not anyone can access it, but
Hmm.
it's if someone does want to try it, then they can email me and we can put like my contact details in there, and then
Hmm.
I can set them up like I set you up. But
Yeah, so
at the moment you can't just go on my website and go, I want to join, and then join. That's kind of, it's still being developed, and that's kind of around 3 months away.
so if anyone wants to break down their efforts for any of upcoming races and you liked what you saw and you want to have that breakdown on your own profile, I will leave Jake's contact information, and you can also contact him through that top cycling on Instagram. But I might say that Jake said it's in 3 months of development. I would say it could be shorter because now Jake has plenty of time.
Yeah.
Leaving fun jokes aside, I don't know how much you want to cover everything. You can show me maybe to the camera how it's like.
Give some further context, I suppose. Essentially what happened is I was riding, I had a race in 2 days time. This is back when it happened, which is almost
March,
8 weeks ago now.
beginning of March, something like that.
It was 2 days before my birthday. So
Oh fuck.
yeah, pretty bad. But so I'd gone out basically to check my bike was all good and just, do a couple of efforts to like open my legs up ready for the race. I was riding to this little circuit I like to do regularly before a race where it's just like a little punchy climb, there's like a little technical descent, and I just kind of do a few loops of it. And so I was riding over there, which I've done hundreds of times, on this trail that I've done hundreds of times. And it's not a hard trail. It's not very technical. I wasn't really concentrating. I had my ear pods in. So I was like listening to music. And I don't know, maybe because it'd been drier than normal, the trail had like changed a bit more than I anticipated. Mm-hmm. My front wheel just kind of got bumped a bit. And I think maybe because I was on a hard tail, I wasn't concentrating enough to make the correction.
Mm-hmm.
Which, say if I was on a full suspension mountain bike, maybe I wouldn't even needed to make a correction. But and because I wasn't going very quick, I didn't get the momentum to go away from the bike. So I ended up falling. Basically, my arm got stuck under the bike and I landed on the bike, right? And then essentially what happened is my whole forearm just snapped in two pieces. And
so it was open broken bones.
Yeah. So I remember I crashed and I was like, oh, that was so stupid. What a stupid crash. Well, and I looked down and I kind of, when you crash and you kind of check yourself, right?
Yeah.
And obviously my body had been given so much adrenaline. I didn't feel pain or anything. I was just like looking around like, I feel okay. And then I kind of looked at my arm and I was like, oh shit, there's a stick in my arm. Like there's a stick sticking out my arm. So I tried to pull it out and it was my bone, right? So I tried to pull on the bone and then I was like, oh fuck. And then I saw my hand and my hand was basically hanging off. Like the only reason my hand was still attached to my arm was through the skin and some of the muscle. Like it was just flopping. And so at that point I was like, oh man, I'm fucked. Like this is really bad. I need an ambulance or I'm gonna die. Like what happens if it starts bleeding? Like fuck. And I was on my own as well. But luckily I was not that far away from the main kind of fire road and it's a very popular mountain biking and walking destination. But actually it didn't happen in Wales, which I'll go on to in a second. I was actually quite lucky. It happened in England, just over the border, in a place called the Forest of Dean, which if anyone is British and they mountain bike listening, they'll know exactly where it is. But I got quite lucky, so I came out onto the main path and there was someone right there already. So they saw me and was like, holy shit, let's call an ambulance. And then the ambulance came and I was taken to the hospital in Bristol, which is really good, Southmead. They're like a major trauma centre. So they basically, kind of reset all the bones. But because it was open, and the way they had to like clean it all out, right? So they had to like remove quite a lot of skin and tissue, and essentially they even had to remove some bone because it was also muddy and the risk of infection is really high. And because of that, it then became really difficult to essentially put my arm back together because they had to remove so much of it. So they really struggled to get coverage. Setting the bones was not a problem. Like, I've got loads of metal in it now, just like 2 big bits of metal. They set the bones, that's fine. But the difficulty was then getting the skin coverage on the arm. And that just was like brutal. I had to have 6 surgeries and they just kept saying, no, it's not working. And then with each passing surgery where it didn't work, the conversation just got darker and darker. And the doctors were saying, you know, we have to tell you now, there is a growing chance that, you know, we're not going to be able to get this covered. And that means you will have to lose your arm because the risk of infection in the bone is too high. And if you get infection in the bone, you'll die, you know? So it got really dark. And then the guy who's, like I said, you know, my hero now, Michael Rice, the doctor, they got this other surgeon in and he was like, look, I've got a plan. I think I can save it. And then he did. So yeah, shout out to him. He sorted me out. And then I guess what's cool, you can't really see it, but I'll kind of try and show this camera a little bit. Oh. But basically, that's where that is like an open. There's no skin on that.
It's like a window.
Yeah, it's like a window. So you can see all the muscles, and you can see the tendon, and you can even see like the veins and the blood flowing through the veins.
Oh fuck.
And essentially what they've done is it's like this synthetic skin, right? So it's like a honeycomb, and then your skin cells start to like grow through it, and then on the top it's like when you get a new iPhone and there's that plastic bit. When it's ready, they peel the plastic bit off, and then it's like your skin is then ready to take on a different skin graft. So it's like it's done 80% of the healing, and then you just get like a bit of skin on the top which closes it up. Whereas before, what they were trying to do was basically take like the flesh, so not just the skin, the muscle, everything, and put that on, but it just wasn't, the blood flow just wasn't working.
It wasn't accepting it.
Yeah, wasn't accepting it, probably because it was so damaged. But now, yeah, it looks good. I have use of my fingers, which is great. So the chances are I kind of will get full use in my arm again. I'm going to have loads of scarring. My arm will look pretty crazy for a while. And, you know, in terms of like the rehab, it's going to be a long time to get strength and stuff back. Like, I keep pressing the doctors all the time, like, when can I ride a bike? When will I be able to ride a bike again? And they're all like, oh yeah, you know, don't think about it at the moment. You need to focus on this, focus on that. And then last time I saw them, the guy kind of finally gave in, and he was like, it's going to be at least, you know, 6 months until you can ride a bike outside.
Outside. He said outside.
Yeah.
That's important word.
So I've already started turbo training.
Really?
Yeah, just easy, like not hard training, just like
spin the legs.
Yeah, spinning my legs. So I mean, hopefully I don't come across as like I don't know, rambling about it, but
no. I mean, it's like it's good for everyone to appreciate what they have, and you know, I guess you will look at the things a bit differently regardless anything, because it gave you some thought to consider about life. And then at the same time, it's like very serious. And you know, of course, people are dying every day, blah blah blah. But then in I can't say very close circle, but still, you are kind of my friend now, and it was shocking. For the record, we've been in touch with Jake through WhatsApp, blah blah blah, and I knew that he's in trouble. And then his fiance answered his message after a while, like, "Hey, Jake is not in the good condition, and he will get in touch with you once everything is in a better situation." And it took like 2 weeks, so because I knew that it's open, broken bone, all sorts of thoughts also came to my mind. Anything can happen, so like, we all glad and extremely happy that it went in right way, not the our one.
It's kind of poignant that you said that, because it doesn't. What it really made me realize is, and hopefully, like, maybe this isn't the best thing to do on a mountain bike focused podcast, but it did make me realize that mountain biking and any cycling really is inherently dangerous. Like, I've had some bad crashes as a racing my bike on the road. Like, I've had some really bad crashes and done some, I've broken so many bones. Like, there's not really a bone in my body that hasn't had some sort of damage, like my arm, my leg, my back, my pelvis. But this made me think, because it was so severe, you realized it doesn't just affect you, the impact that it has on like everyone around you is so big. And we're not pros. Like, this isn't like this isn't like how we provide for our family. This is our hobby. And to know that it can go wrong so badly, it's like, and then you see, like, you see the impact it had on everyone. And it wasn't even me. It wasn't even just my family, right? Even the doctors were getting upset. Even the people that were caring for me just in the hospital were like getting upset, because it's so awful to watch. And I kind of, it's almost like, I think it would be worse for Becky, right? I would rather be the one in the bed with the broken arm than have to watch Becky go through the same thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's been that plays on my mind, and that will be difficult to. I don't know if that will change how I now approach, mountain biking or road cycling, or I think my respect for the danger has gone up, and it's not because of me. It's not because of yes, it was painful, and yes, it was bad, and yes, the experience was bad, but there's that voice in my head that goes, you could still race, you can still do this cool stuff, like, it wouldn't stop me. Do you know what I mean? But seeing the impact it had on everyone else makes me think, maybe it's not worth it.
I mean, I wish we would understand that those who haven't experienced these severe injuries, without a need to experience them, because usually what I heard from those who experience any sort of crashes, injuries, etc., that until you are not in someone's shoes who did it, you won't get it. But as I said, we should don't take things for granted and just appreciate what we have.
Exactly. And saying that as well, on the flip side, like, now I have my arm back as such, and now I know I'm going to make, I don't 100% know I'm going to make a total full recovery, but I know I'm going to get to 90%. Like, that's like, I'm very confident of that, and I am confident of making a full recovery. So it's like, I am so appreciative of that I want to go and ride again. I want to go and mountain bike again. I want to do all those things again, because I can, and I should, because I'm capable of doing it. So you can't live in fear. You can't live with like being scared of that stuff. But I think respecting it is important. So I'll never ever ride my mountain bike with earpods in again.
That's a good one. And actually, as we talked the other days, if it's mean to be, it will mean to be. And yeah, being precautious is important. But on the other hand, you can basically experience the same thing falling off the stairs or literally
Exactly, yeah.
anywhere. So it's dangerous activity, and at the same time it can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
But hopefully it won't happen any more longer, and because now everything is in your capable hands and your will, I'm pretty sure that one way or another you will be back, and where and how we'll see in the future.
Well, I mean, Becky may or may not ever watch this. She probably won't. She'll never get to the end of the episode anyway. So I think I can say this safely, but I still want to do
Med Epic, we're
Med
going
Epic
to do it next year.
So I mean, I don't know what like fitness or like what shape I'll be in, but if I could go and do it, that would be like really cool.
You know, it's harsh to say on my end, but now maybe we will be a bit more same level.
Yeah, we'll see.
You will lose
you
will lose a bit of FTP, and maybe we will be alongside each other.
Yeah, I think the danger is how slow I'll be going downhill rather than how slow I'll be going uphill, but we'll see. I'm not putting pressure on it, you know.
If it turns out to be that rehab is good and you are good to go back, then it's great. If not, maybe the other year, and who knows?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that being said, if you liked this Crafted for Speed series episode, we encourage you to follow, subscribe, listen on Spotify or whichever medium you would want to. Also on the Instagram, we kind of share some snippets from the conversations. There's some mosquito out there, so we share snippets from the conversations in Instagram where you can learn key bits from the episodes. And this one turned out really interesting, thanks to Jake once again. Maybe you want to make some closing.
Next time we're going to cover a lot of stuff that people get bombarded with all the time. Like what does your resting heart rate mean and the changes in it? Like what is good sleep? And like, you know, everyone tracks their sleep now from their watch and all of this data, and that's a big data source that a lot of people don't really know what to do with. So I think it's going to be really useful to get some insight of like, okay, how does me, the coach, view this information and make useful decisions from it?
Are we going also to cover a bit of recovery in terms of nutrition?
No, nutrition will be the following episode.
Okay.
So it's going to be more like physical recovery, and then that will follow into nutrition and how that aids recovery and how that aids fueling for your sessions and everything.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks a lot for the time, Jake, and we will meet in the next episode.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions, put them in the comments and we'll answer them next week.
That's a very good point, because last time no one asked anything, so we didn't pretend that we were some. So make sure that next time we don't need to ask you again to make questions. If you ask us anything, Jake will talk for another half an hour.
Exactly, yeah.
Unless you don't want for Jake to talk, then just shut it up.
Maybe that's what they're saying.
Oh no, we're not going to ask anything because it will last. Like, we don't have that much time.